Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Happy Monday. Happy first day of fall.
Well, hey,
Welcome to
it
Florida.
feels. I mean, I got out there to get to the car, and I wasn't sweating between the front door and the car. I'm like, what's going on? Did I move?
I know. Doesn't it put a little pep in your step? I mean, just wait until we get into October-ish. Then we'll really be frisky.
Yeah, we have this this cooling off temperature, but we're surrounded by all kinds of storms out there in the Caribbean.
Are we?
They're everywhere.
Are they? They're just
they
popping
look like
up right
roaches
and left?
out there.
Oh,
everywhere.
Man. I haven't even looked.
Oh, yeah.
What do the spaghetti models look like?
Everything, it's really weird. Everything has been going up through the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Everything, even Karen now is, not coming close. She's going to just go up.
Well, thank God for that Gulf Stream or whatever it is that moves them right up and away. Moves them
Been
up
very
and away.
lucky so far.
I mean, we really have. We really have.
I know.
Particularly with that one that hit the Bahamas. I mean, the poor people in the Bahamas, just terrible things going on there.
I know. That's so. Oh, I've been reading about stuff those medics are going through, trying to save the people. It just breaks your heart. And again, I mean, they couldn't be nicer. We've all been to the Bahamas in here, right?
No,
you
I haven't made it. I've seen it on TV though.
Okay,
and then people seem very nice on TV.
I know Mr. Cruiser has been to the Bahamas.
Quite a few times.
Yes,
but the part that got hit was probably the nicer part.
Was it?
Yeah, I kind of like the Abacos a lot better than anywhere else in the Bahamas. So.
Yeah.
Well, I did talk to somebody, and they said they were thinking about buying property there. Because, now I guess is the time people are motivated to say, you know what, I don't want to go through this again, ever.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Try to buy insurance, buy property, but you're not going to be able to buy insurance.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. You better be independently wealthy, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot to get into today.
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot of cool things to talk about. We didn't really get to finish up all of the discussion on the Democrat debate, but we got some more stuff to discuss this week regarding the Democrats. So we got some great clips for you that we're going to get into in a bit. But before we did that, we wanted to take a quick look back at a story that we've talked about as an out there story before, and that is this whole what they're now calling UAP. You know about that, Pat George?
No, what is
UAP?
This?
That's the new word for UFO. UFO another word you got to know.
Mm-hmm.
UFO is unidentified flying object. UAP is unidentified aerial phenomenon.
What's the difference?
Well, they're saying we're not convinced these are definitely flying, but they do occur in the air. Now, how you get to that, I have no idea. Maybe they just wanted to change it up a little bit. They're like, look, that UFO thing, that's so 1960s. Let's come up with something more modern with UAPs. But the important thing about this story is that the U.S. Navy has now come out. They had their Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare come out and say that those 3 videos, if you know the videos we're talking about, they're the ones that were released, what was it, about a year ago? Maybe it's getting up to be almost, has it been 2 years? I don't know. I think it's been about a little bit over a year. But there are these videos of the pill. If you remember hearing about the pill flying around.
There's something to them.
There's something to them. There's some kind of, we don't know what it is. It's an unidentified aerial phenomenon that's pictured on the videos. And you've got these U.S. Navy jets, I think they were F-18 Hornets, and they've got this really highly sophisticated FLIR camera, forward-looking infrared camera that they use to track bombing targets and other planes in the sky and other things. And they're trying to get this to lock on to the UAP that they appear to visualize. And they finally do get, this to lock on. And there's several different videos. I think there's 3 total. Where they lock on to one of these UAPs and sort of the plane can track it for a little while. And then, of course, the thing just sort of takes off at faster than trackable speed. And so, what do these videos depict? Nobody knows. I mean, they depict some phenomenon that defies what we understand to be the laws of physics.
Wow.
Now, how would that be explained? I've heard all kinds of theories about how do UFOs or UAPs, how do they travel? And maybe they've got some kind of a gravity engine inside of them that creates a high degree of gravity immediately in front of them that kind of pulls them forward and bends the laws of space and space-time, bends the laws of physics as we know them. Because these things travel faster than they should be able to. They stop faster than they should be able to. and they change direction faster than they should be able to, and it's to the point where it would literally kill a human being if they were inside the craft. And, it's going, and let's just say Mach 10 or something, and then immediately makes a 90-degree right-hand turn. I mean, the human being inside that would be just smashed up against the wall, and the forces, the inertial forces on the human would essentially kill them. Mm-hmm. But somehow these crafts are able to maneuver in this way. It also ripped the craft apart, too. I shouldn't fail to mention that. The whole thing would just disintegrate if we tried to pull something like that with one of our existing airplanes or aircraft. So now, the U.S. Navy's saying these videos are genuine. But what they're saying is don't jump to any conclusions, everyone, because we still haven't figured out what's in the videos. Okay, so they're definitely it's possible they're not aliens. That's what they want us to know. It may not be aliens.
It may not be aliens. So what's the alternative?
But thank you. I mean, are these creatures from the inside of the earth or something? I mean, what are we dealing with here? Somebody's got some kind of technology that is far, far in advance of what we are deploying currently. And
we hope it's not another country.
Yeah.
That would be my number one hope. I would rather have the aliens have access to that technology because then they would feel superior to us anyways, possibly.
Right.
So maybe they're not intimidated by us, but if China or Russia has that,
oh boy.
No, thank you.
Oh boy.
If we could just get one to land and just stop for a minute.
That's right.
So we could talk to them.
That's right. If only we just, hey, could you just have a dialogue with us? Meanwhile, they're probably looking at us about the same way we might look at the ants. And they're like, have a dialogue with you, you little ant person. And we saw those folks actually try to go out there and storm Area 51 in this same kind of vein, if you remember that story. Now, apparently not many people actually showed up for that event.
They went down early Friday morning. Only about 100 people showed up, and no one made it inside. There was just one arrest. A guy got busted for indecent exposure after he used the restroom near the gate.
Yeah. Well, they don't have portalets out there, so what do you expect?
No, they had a ton of portalets.
Well, not at the gates, though.
Not at the gates, but in the park area.
Yeah.
Never got used.
Well, that's it. I mean, they had several different venues. They had bands coming in. They were expecting a large crowd, and I think they said a total of maybe 3,000 people came to like the music venues and stuff. I mean, and that may be pushing it. Maybe it was more like 300. I don't know. It apparently was not very many at all.
One woman was detained for a second when she put her foot under the barrier of the gate. Doesn't that sound like putting your toe in the water?
That's right. Watch me now storm Area 51, slide my foot under the gate. Oh, look at that. I'm in and out, just like that. Well, I tell you, all these stories about UFOs and UAPs and everything else, it sure gets my juices going because, I mean, I think it's just very interesting stuff. And I wonder what we are actually dealing with here, particularly in respect to these videos of the UAPs. I mean, what in the world could that possibly depict? And I have no idea. And I'll tell you, if you haven't seen them, you got to go out there and watch some of them because one of them looks like, if you remember the old gyroscopes from when you were in elementary school. Did you ever play with a gyroscope?
Sure,
I did.
I don't know if they still do that in elementary school. That may not be part of Common Core. But anyway, I remember, winding up the gyroscopes and spinning them off and everything. Well, one of these UAPs looks essentially like a gyroscope floating in the sky. Well, if you think about a gyroscope, it kind of looks similar to a flying saucer. I mean, so it's very clearly a circular object with something coming out of the top and out of the bottom of it. So, again, who knows what these things are? Who knows what they are? And the U.S. Navy says they don't know, but these videos are genuine. They depict something that really happened in the sky that the Navy doesn't know what it is.
Can't explain. I think it just comes down to if you have such a big ego that you think we're the only thing going on, you might be fooling yourself. But it's just hard to fathom these other things. Our imagination our imagination takes us to E.T.
Right. Well, and what a perfect
Terminator,
segue to some of our next talk about egos, because I mean, that's what pretty much the whole rest of the show is going to be about, because we're going to talk some about what's going on with the whole Trump call to Ukraine and the whistleblower and all that story that kind of blew up at the end of last week and then was perpetuated throughout the weekend. We saw it over and over and over again. And then we're going to touch base with the front runner for the Democrat presidential nomination, which now appears to be Elizabeth Warren, as we indicated last week. So Elizabeth Warren seems to be moving into the number one position, and Joe Biden is kind of dropping back, and I don't think he's going to mount a late surge in the polls. I think Biden's living on borrowed time. And we'll share with you some of the quotes that happened over the weekend in Iowa that I think will begin to, indicate to you why Joe Biden is probably not long for the campaign world. And you'll hear some of that. And then when we get into our Out There segment today, we've got a great Out There segment, which is a clip from a guy who makes these quantum computers. And he's talking about what AI, artificial intelligence, actually is. And I think you're going to be pretty shocked to hear what he has to say about that. So stick around. We got a lot more on the Morgan Streetman Show.
We're back on the Morgan Streetman Show, and our off-air conversations sometimes take us in a different direction on air.
You never know. We come in with a plan, but we don't often stick to the plan.
Well, my big concern off air was that what is going on with this pipeline in Iran? And I hear all the rumblings, friends that tell me that CENTCOM right now is very busy.
Well, yeah, we have heard some of that from some folks here locally that CENTCOM at MacDill was super busy this past weekend. A lot of things going on, lots of jets taking off, and different kinds of transport planes, refueling planes appear to be taking off. One of the reasons I didn't put this on the schedule to talk about is the truth is I don't have a good handle on what's going on right now with respect to Iran. I think it seems like we're teetering on the brink of potentially some kind of military attack. I don't know, though. It does seem to me that President Trump has been generally resistant to getting us into another war. Mm-hmm. Now, he hasn't gotten us out of some of the wars quite as fast as he'd promised, but, it's kind of one of those things that once he gets into office, he says, well, they informed me of more information, and we need to leave at least a few troops over there in Afghanistan or something like that. If you remember, President Trump ran on a platform of trying to get us out of some of these foreign entanglements that we've become so involved in over the last, say, about 20 years or more. Now, with respect to Iran, what I think is very troubling about Iran's a big country. Now, militarily, they just simply don't stack up against the United States, but really, let's face it, almost nobody in the world does. But wars don't go according to the chart that you write out ahead of time. It's not something you could sort of plan out, kind of like we might plan out this show and expect it to go the way that you planned. I mean, all kinds of things happen in warfare, including asymmetrical warfare. And some of the things that we don't know about is, has Iran successfully planted, and I would assume that they have, sleeper cells within this country to do various kinds of terror attacks. And what could those mean? I mean, what would a sleeper cell with, I don't know, a kilo of fentanyl, which apparently isn't very hard to get a hold of.
Right.
And if they could dump it into the public reservoir that feeds an entire city's water supply, everybody in the city is going to be dead before you realize it. Mm. So, I mean, is that the kind of asymmetric warfare that we could run into if we start a war? And I think that's one of the reasons that you want to be careful about starting wars and getting into wars. And it kind of goes back to one of the overriding theories of this show, which is the law of unintended consequences.
What happens when you do A? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what happens? And you plan out, okay, these are what I think the consequences are going to be and everything else. But always, it seems to me that always something happens that you didn't plan on, you didn't count on, or you thought, oh, that's never going to happen or whatever. Something always happens, and it kind of throws things off. It throws your plan off.
Is it just my imagination? Or is the Saudis, they don't seem very mad about this.
Yeah, I mean, we're the ones who are more mad. Right. You attack the Saudis. You don't dare attack the Saudis. Well, you know, we do have a long-standing deal with the Saudis on the petrodollar, which I think helped out the American economy worldwide for many, many years. And that is that in order to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, and then I think it was eventually the entirety of OPEC, you had to trade in U.S. dollars, which creates a built-in demand for U.S. dollars. And so that, in one way, kind of propped up our economy. I don't say, let's don't take it too far, but that certainly helped our economy. It helped the dollar to be the world's reserve currency so that other countries wanted to get a quantity of dollars and hold on to them, in their reserves, and they needed to use them to buy oil and other things. So, it's very interesting what's about to happen. I don't know what's about to happen. I get the feeling that President Trump does not want to get into a war with Iran because he certainly had the opportunity, if he was just looking for an excuse, when they shot down that drone, everybody was all up in arms. And if you remember, it was just a couple weeks ago that, he either fired Bolton or Bolton quit, and there's dispute about that. I would suspect that the president terminated him, but anyway, who knows? But anyway, Bolton's out. Now, why do you think Bolton is out? Because Bolton was probably, steady hammering on President Trump to go to war with Iran.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of been one of Bolton's main platforms over the years. Now, again, look, if Iran directly attacks us or something like that, and it actually happens, and it's not, something that's sort of invented by the media, and I'm more and more suspicious of the media's inventions, then we have to go to war with Iran, I guess. But short of that, I hope we avoid it, because I think there's going to be some unintended consequences, and I don't think it's going to play out just exactly as we expect. And, of course, there's always in warfare a lot of innocent civilians who are killed. You've got what you call collateral damage. I mean, that's a fancy way of saying people who aren't directly involved get killed. And, I mean, if one of those people is your mother or your father, your brother, I mean, how would you feel? I'd be pretty upset. And I'm sure that the people in Iran and other places where there is collateral damage also get upset.
Sorry, I got you a little off track there.
That's okay.
Well, not to take us too far off track, but one unintended consequence that we probably know will happen is whatever President Trump decides to do with this situation, it will be fodder for the Democrats to criticize him for.
Oh, I mean, I tell you what, they don't miss an opportunity to criticize the president. And we saw some of that over the weekend because there was some whistleblower who's come out, and this is such a bunch of baloney, in my opinion, to come out and share private, confidential, essentially secret conversations that should be classified at some level between President Trump and the leader of another country. Now, there's a whole bunch of backstory here that the media isn't giving you. They're just simply trying to trot the story out as though President Trump tried to pressure the Ukrainians to investigate Joe Biden and his son. Well, that's not really what happened. What actually happened is the Ukrainians have been asking to try to share this information with the Trump administration that they already have, and had been frustrated on many different levels to doing that. They've given it to a private lawyer who was supposed to hand walk it to the Department of Justice, and apparently that lawyer took it to the wrong Department of Justice and took it to the Southern District in New York offices, which are highly liberal, and where it got buried instead of taking it to the D.C. offices. But here's what I want to say. Joe Biden was all over the place this weekend, and we're going to share some of that with you. And just listen up, because this is the whole story. The story is about Joe Biden going to Ukraine and getting a prosecutor who was investigating an energy company in Ukraine that had hired Hunter Biden to help them with this problem. He got that prosecutor fired. Now, Ukraine has a lot of trouble with corruption, and this was an anti-corruption prosecutor. This was essentially somebody who should have been a national hero, and Joe Biden got him fired. Now, let's hear this in Joe Biden's own words at a Council on Foreign Relations event where he makes this into kind of a joke. Now, listen in, because this is the truth of the story.
I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko. They would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired.
Oh, so Biden said, I'm not giving you $1 billion from the United States unless you fire that state prosecutor. Now, does that sound like corruption to you? Why did he want the prosecutor fired so bad, right? Mm-hmm. Well, because the guy was investigating a company that his son had a big interest in. But now you listen to Joe Biden over the weekend. Listen to how irritated he gets with Peter Doocy when Peter asks him a question about what's going on in this whole story.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so how do you know?
Let's talk about, here's what I know. I know Trump deserves to be investigated. He is violating every basic norm of a president. You should be asking him the question, why is he on the phone with a foreign leader, trying to intimidate a foreign leader, if that's what happened? That appears what happened. You should be looking at Trump. Everybody looked at this, and everybody's looked at it and said there's nothing there. Ask the right questions.
Okay, but if you've never spoken to your son...
Can he be impeached for this?
Depending on what the House finds, He could be impeached, but I'm not making that judgment now. The House should investigate it. The House should investigate this. This appears to be an overwhelming abuse of power. To get on the phone with a foreign leader who is looking for help from the United States and ask about me and imply things, if that's what happened. That appears to be what happened. We know that's what Giuliani did. This is outrageous. You have never seen anything like this from any president.
Well, first of all, Biden's full of it because that's not what happened. There was no intimidation. There was no quid pro quo. But let's just flip back to what Joe Biden said, right? Talk about intimidation. He said, I'm getting on the plane in 6 hours. You don't fire that prosecutor, you ain't getting the $1 billion. And, well, son of a gun, they fired the prosecutor. That's intimidation. Joe Biden's the one who tried to intimidate Ukraine, not Donald Trump.
Don't you wish politicians would just say what they're doing when they responded? Like, okay, now I'm going to enthusiastically and aggressively deflect what you just talked about.
Well, and here's another part of that little clip that wasn't included in the clip that I just shared with you. And this is, again, more of the nonsense from Joe Biden, like you're saying. Listen to this.
Trump's doing this because he knows I'll beat him like a drum.
Oh, yeah, right, crazy sleepy Joe. Trump's really scared of you, buddy. I'll tell you what, I don't know what, he wouldn't know what to do with himself if you're the Democrat nominee because you are such a fearsome candidate, you can't even keep your words straight, as we'll catch up to later. Now, I want you to hang around after this break because we've actually got a great video, which we've just clipped out the audio for, and you're going to hear the Trump campaign's quick response this weekend to Joe Biden. You're going to love it.
On the Morgan Streetman Show, and we were just chatting a little bit about the Ukraine hullabaloo.
Oh,
and
and some about climate change. We were talking about. I mean, I tell you what, people are hammering us on climate change, and you look this stuff up. I just saw a story in the news. I don't have it pulled up right now, but I just saw a story in the news that the majority, like the vast majority of plastic pollution in the oceans comes out of rivers, and the vast majority of those rivers, I think 6 of them are in Asia and 2 of them are in Africa. And so it's basically the rivers flowing out of India and China that are causing all the plastic pollution in all the oceans. That's really the sum total of the story. But meanwhile, here in the United States, we're getting browbeat about this stuff day in and day out, like our drinking out of a plastic straw is somehow killing the whales. And this is just kind of par for the course with the way the Democrats handle the issues. And another issue that they've been handling in that way is health care. And I mean, we talked about this last week. I mean, just the sort of abject hypocrisy or the tale of two cities. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. And I want you to remember what Elizabeth Warren, because we're going to talk about some of what she said about health care. I want you to remember what she said back during the Democrat debates, because I just can't wrap my mind around why we're supposed to be so thankful to President Obama, right? And because, I mean, apparently the health care system in this country is in total shambles. But nevertheless, we have to be thankful for that.
So let's be clear about health care, and let's actually start where Vice President did. We all owe a huge debt to President Obama, who fundamentally transformed health care in America.
Okay, he fundamentally transformed health care. Now let's hear the problems with the health care system. And this comes from her interview on Colbert, and we've got a great clip from that, too, where Colbert kind of calls her out on her obfuscating the truth. But let's hear this.
Here's how I look at it. I've spent a big chunk of my career studying why families go broke. And a big reason that families go broke is health care. And even today, people with insurance are going broke over a bad medical diagnosis. And people are getting stretched financially. Why? Well, first you've got high premiums. And then you've got that copay. You need to go to the doctor. You're going to have to do a copay. Oh, and for the insurance company says, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover that doctor, not in network. And then for the specialist you need to see, that the insurance company says, no, you don't need to see the specialist. And for the extra physical therapy, and for going to the pharmacy, and that drug is not covered, and this one has a high copay. Families are paying and paying and paying. And a big part of the reason they're paying is because the insurance companies have set up their business model. And their model is rake in as much money as you can in premiums, and then say no as often as you can to health care coverage. And the consequence of that is they pulled $23 billion out of the system last year. They imposed costs on everyone else with all the forms that had to be filled out and people arguing over could they get this covered or that covered. This is not a sustainable health care system.
Okay, so now it's not a sustainable system, and this is under Obamacare, right? Now, listen, here's her follow-up, because God knows we can't forget to thank President Obama for this.
I am so deeply grateful
to
President Obama, who moved this country to say, we as a country want every person here to have health care coverage. And now it's time to take the next step and say, let's do that.
Let's do that. So that's what Obama did. That's what we're so thankful for, was he moved the country to say that every person should have health care. He didn't actually provide a working health care system. That whole Obamacare thing is a complete joke. Now let's hear Elizabeth Warren, and this is the clip that I really loved and I really wanted to share with you, because Stephen Colbert kind of calls her out on her. Well, she's got this cockamamie explanation about how whether the middle class are going to pay more and whether the rich are going to pay more and everything else. So listen to this and see if you can figure it out.
The most radical thing that you're proposing is Medicare for all.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
You think that's the most radical? I kind of like the 2-cent wealth tax myself. But yeah, I like them all. I'll take them all. But I'm big on Medicare for all.
I think the 2-cent wealth tax is nothing compared to the 90% top tax bracket that was during the Eisenhower administration.
Yeah.
So that's not as radical as that was before. But there hasn't been Medicare for all before. You keep being asked in the debates, how are you going to pay for it? Are you going to raise the middle class taxes?
Right.
How are you going to pay for it? Are you going to raise the middle class taxes?
So here's how we're going to do this. Costs are going to go up for the wealthiest Americans, for big corporations.
Taxes, what do you mean by cost?
Yeah. Okay. And hard-working middle-class families are going to see their costs go down.
But will their taxes go up?
Well, but here's the thing.
Here's the thing. I've listened to these answers a few times before, and I just want to make a parallel suggestion for you about how you might defend the taxes that perhaps you're not mentioning in your sentence. Isn't Medicare for all like public school?
So, actually,
there might be taxes for it, but you certainly save a lot of money on sending your kids to school. And do you want to live in a world where kids aren't educated? Do you want to live in a world where your fellow citizens are dying, even if it costs a little bit of money?
So I accept your point, and I believe in your point. Healthcare is a basic human right. We fight for basic human rights, and that's Medicare for all. Everyone gets covered.
Okay, so then, you can hear she dodges the question on how much it's going to cost. I mean, Bernie Sanders years ago said Medicare for all would bankrupt this country. Now, we're going back about 20 years, but they all know we cannot afford this. They all know we cannot afford it, and that's why they dodged the question. Now, don't miss the fact that this is a love fest we were just playing for you between Elizabeth Warren and Stephen Colbert.
He's teeing her up.
He loves her policies.
Mm-hmm.
He loves everything. So he's not against them, but he's still saying, look, you're not being honest with people. And she isn't being honest, and none of the Democrats are. They're not being honest when they tell you how thankful we need to be to President Obama for this great health care system. And that's what she said in the debates. Then now she has to change it to he moved the country. He moved the country to feeling like everybody needs to be covered. And that's what we're thankful for, because the point is the healthcare system is an absolute disaster, and it's been made a disaster by government meddling. That's what's made it a disaster, not private industry, which is what she wants to blame. Now, things only get worse from there, but, we want to switch gears back because I had some quotes, and now I want to show you why I don't think Joe Biden is going to make it. I think Elizabeth Warren is the de facto frontrunner of the Democrat primary. Now, believe me, I think President Trump is just as excited about facing off against Elizabeth Warren as he is against Joe Biden, because they're different types of enemies. Joe Biden is going to make a bunch of gaffes, as you will hear, and Elizabeth Warren is clearly much sharper. But remember, this is the lady who defrauded people for almost her entire life by claiming to be an American Indian. That's how she got her position. That's how she got a professorship. That's how she got her scholarships. We didn't get to share those quotes with you last week, but we had them all from the Democrat debate. That's how she made herself, was off of the lie and taking from an actual American Indian the affirmative action quota that was actually designated for somebody who actually was disadvantaged for being an American Indian. But instead, Elizabeth Warren, a white lady, swoops in and takes that spot from a worthy American Indian. And as we've said before, if that's not racism, I don't know what is. But let's hear Joe Biden, and he was at an LGBTQ forum in Iowa over the weekend. Let's hear him answer the question, because you'll love what he calls their community. Listen closely.
By the way, in prison, the determination should be that your sexual identity is defined by what you say it is, not what, in fact, the prison says it is. And in that case, you should be entitled also to OGBYN. Anyway, you didn't ask that question.
You didn't ask that question. Now that I realize I'm totally off the reservation. LGBYN, okay? Forget LGBTQ. This is a new group, LGBYN, Joe Biden says, okay? I don't know what the Y and the N stand for, but I'm sure somebody can fill us in on that.
Yes,
but the
no.
LGBYNs.
Check one, yes or no.
And hey, by the way, the new rule is when you go to prison, you pick your own gender, Pat George. You want to be in a men's prison, Pat George?
I don't think I'll be.
Are you going to be? Well, you're not going to prison. I know. Let's say I was going to prison.
You're not going either.
I know I'm not going. But dadgummit, if I had to go, I'm becoming a woman first. I'm not actually becoming a woman. I'm not going to do the whole gender reassignment.
You're just going to tell them.
But since it matters only what I say, not what the prison says, I want to go to women's prison. And believe me, it's not to hang out with the women. It's just I figure in a prison fight, I probably got a better shot of surviving, if I'm at the women's prison. The men's prison, they're probably going to shiv me and I might not make it. Yeah, highly intimidating. It would be highly intimidating to go to prison. Now, Joe Biden goes on to say that the government ought to pay for, as part of their health care largesse, they ought to pay for gender reassignment surgery. Now, that is an elective surgery, okay? It'd be like saying the government ought to pay for cosmetic surgery as well. And, we've rarely heard some people even use those kind of terms. But it's just crazy to me that you can get an elective surgery. Now, if you can afford it, great. But how can you make the rest of the country pay for your elective surgery? In other words, it's not medically necessary, but you want to force people to pay for it. And these are Joe Biden's ideas. Now, if you think he was the only one at this forum talking some nonsense, we got one more to share with you, and that is Cory Booker. Because Cory Booker, they were all at this forum over the weekend pandering to this LGBTQ group. And so now listen to this, and this is really important because think about this. Think about what they say should no longer be a crime. Listen closely.
All right, so one last question before we let you go. In 2014, Iowa was the first state to modernize its law on transmission of communicable diseases, getting rid of an outdated policy that criminalizes non-disclosure of an individual's HIV status. Unfortunately, many states still have these laws on the books, which can lead to the draconian prison sentences for those accused of non-disclosure. These laws have no scientific basis, discourage testing, and disproportionately impact LGBT people of color, a group that you've spoken a lot about today. As president, how would you handle this on the national stage through your policies and discussions around HIV and AIDS, and would you be willing to get rid of this idea within law?
Yes, absolutely. And so, number one, we have to do things to prevent discrimination, but we still have a lot of work to do with the over 1 million people in America with HIV and AIDS. Or AIDS.
Now, I want you to focus on the actual question because he talks about an outdated policy. And what he means is there are criminal laws in place that if you have sexual relations with somebody and you know that you've got HIV or AIDS and you don't disclose it to them, that's a crime. And the point is these people are saying that should not be a crime. That is mystifying to me how you could have an STD of any type, be aware of it, and then have sexual contact with someone else and you don't reveal it. It's like a battery. You're giving them potentially a life-threatening virus. Listen to the question again. The way they've wrapped this up is just being an outdated policy. This is the law. This is the law.
Getting rid of an outdated policy that criminalizes non-disclosure of an individual's HIV status. Unfortunately, many states still have these laws on the books.
Unfortunately, many states still have these laws. Would you want these laws in place? Do you want somebody to have to tell you if they've got a potentially incurable, life-threatening disease that they're about to pass to you potentially through contact? Do you want them to have to tell you that? I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it's an unauthorized battery otherwise. They're infecting you with a serious virus. The idea that this wouldn't be criminal absolutely mystifies me, and I bet it mystifies you at home as well. So, folks, when we come back, we're going to jump into some stuff about AI that you're going to love. Stick around.
And we're back on the Morgan Streetman Show. We kind of have figured some things out here. The clip we were listening to a moment ago with Joe Biden.
Oh, I
Pat
love this
George
explanation.
Was smart enough to decipher what he meant when he, that sort of gaffe when he was speaking. Now we think we know what he was saying.
Right. Well, I thought I heard LGBTYN. But you made a great point, Pat George, which is...
That's what I heard, I thought.
Maybe he was referring to an obstetrician gynecologist, OBGYN. It may be. But, either way, the guys just get gaffes coming out of his mouth right and left. And look, I do kind of feel for him. I mean, he's in his mid-70s. You're certainly entitled at some point in life to slow down a little bit, to not be quite as sharp as you were when you were younger. I mean, I don't think there's any shame in that.
I know all my OBGYN appointments lately are my excuse for my brain fog because I'm pregnant.
There you go. So maybe that's what's going on with Joe Biden, too. Maybe his OBGYN appointments, who knows? Who knows, right? Who knows where that goes? Well, one of our Out There segment today, we could have gone a few different directions with this because there's so much in the news, and I don't know if you've been made aware of some of it. For example, this is not the direction we're going today, but I'll just throw this out there. There have been some class action lawsuits filed against Home Depot and Lowe's saying that they're using the cameras in their store for facial recognition purposes, and they literally know exactly who you are when you walk into the store, and then the cameras track you as you move about the store. So, I mean, this is really getting into sort of the 1984 world. Now, the reason the class action lawsuits were filed is because they don't disclose this. They don't give people the opportunity to try to opt out or even know what the data retention policy is. And so those are some of the reasons that it could give rise to a lawsuit. But understand as you move around out there that we've got these facial recognition technologies that are in full deployment, apparently, to the point where your retail stores know who you are when you walk in the door. And how could this become scary? Well, this could become scary when the computers take over, right? Because there's not going to be any escaping. The computers will know who you are and where you are at all times. And imagine the power of having some of that information. And some of what we're going to share with you today, I've got a sort of a lengthy clip from a presentation that was given by a guy whose name is Jordy Rose, and he's the CEO of a company called Kindred AI. Now, Kindred AI makes the only quantum computers that you can currently buy. They're not making the only quantum computers, but they're the only ones trying to commercialize that technology. Now, if you know how the quantum computers work, basically it works by cooling the chipset down, so cooling the computer itself down to nearly absolute zero. Now, absolute zero is a whole lot colder than it ever gets, even in deep space. It is beyond cold. But if they chill the chipsets down to almost absolute zero, they think that there are other chipsets, remember we've explained this to you before, in parallel universes at the same point in space, and cooling it down to absolute zero allows the chips essentially to access the computing power of these other quantum computers in other parallel universes. That's the theory. I don't think that has a lot of evidence behind it. I think the truth is they don't know why it works, and that's even scarier. But let's hear what this guy has to say about the creation of artificial intelligence entities. And I want you to pay special attention to the language he uses, because at one point he kind of compares them to demons, artificial intelligence, but he says they're not really like demons. And then he goes into this lengthy sort of explanation of H.P. Lovecraft, and that they're actually closer to summoning the old ones from the H.P. Lovecraft novels and short stories. And if you know what those are, it's pretty scary stuff. But listen here to what he has to say.
These things that we're building are not going to be people. They might be really smart, they might be really good at all sorts of different things, but they're not going to be like us. They're going to be aliens. And they're going to be, I'm sorry to say, way smarter than every single person in this room, in ways that we can't even comprehend. So this, of course, triggers a lot of alarm. One of the guys who talks about this is Elon, who says things like this, like, when you do this, beware. Because you think, just like the guy in the stories, that when you do this, you're going to put that that little guy in a pentagram, and you're going to have your holy water out, and you're going to wave it at the thing, and by God, it's going to do exactly what you say and not one thing more, but it never works out that way. So this is an attitude that some are having, this emerging alarmism about the way this is going to go. But these words, demons, doesn't capture the essence of what's happening here. I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give it about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate. And going back to that thing that Sam Harris was saying, nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the health.
I like that guy.
Yeah, so listen to the language he's using. I mean, he's using the language of conjuring demons, right? He talks about putting this thing in a pentagram, and you have your holy water to control it. Now, it's just so interesting is probably a word that I'm choosing because I don't want to say something too much stronger, but it's really interesting to me the way that the supposedly smartest people in the world, working on some of the hardest problems in the world, like quantum computing, they seem to have this bent towards occultism and witchcraft, and they seem to be weaving that into the story of what they're creating, right? He says we're talking about summoning these entities, right? Summoning these entities. And I just wonder, why are they using this type of language? I mean, have they had contact with these entities? Have they tried summoning these entities in these little magical ceremonies that they might want to have fun with? I mean, we've certainly talked about how guys like Jack Parsons, the founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was well known for performing these lengthy black magic rituals and trying to bring entities into our universe from another realm. So are these guys, why do they keep going back to this language? I think it's because they dabble in it. I think it's because it's what's familiar to them, and that's actually what they're doing. That they're summoning some kind of entity. They don't really know what it is. They don't really know how they're going to control it. They just know it's really smart and really powerful. And I think we need to watch out for that, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.